Imagine you are driving alone at night, the road empty, the air heavy with silence. Suddenly, a stranger slides into the back seat of your car, his eyes locked on you in the mirror, unblinking, a smile stretched across his face. Or maybe you finally escape the chaos of the city, hiding away in a quiet cabin deep in the woods only to discover your neighbor might not even be alive. And what if, on a cold Christmas night, your phone rings again and again, a voice on the other end whispering your deepest secrets, and then calling out the name of the person sitting right beside you? These are not stories to put you to sleep. They are stories that will keep you awake, heart-pounding, skin-crawling, questioning every sound in the dark. Because danger doesn't always come with warning, it comes hidden in the ordinary moments of life. Welcome to The Price Paid, where true horror comes to light. Subscribe now, if you dare, and stay with us as we unravel 3 terrifying stories that prove the scariest monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They're already among us. It was supposed to be just another shift. Driving late nights for rideshare had become my routine. The money was decent, the streets were empty, and the hours suited me. But the thing about late nights is that they strip the world bare, peeling away the comfort of crowds and daylight, leaving you alone with strangers in your car. I always told myself I was careful, that I knew how to handle the odd passengers, the drunk ones, the ones who talk too much or not at all.
But nothing prepared me for the night I picked up the man outside the convenience store. The ride request came in after 2 in the morning. I remember glancing at my phone and feeling a faint unease before I even accepted it. The pin was dropped at a small convenience store just a few blocks away. Harmless, I thought.
But as I drove closer, something in my gut twisted. The place was dark, not a single light on inside. The parking lot completely empty. It looked abandoned, and yet there was a man waiting there. He was pacing in front of the locked glass doors, shoulders hunched, wearing a gray hoodie so filthy it looked more like a rag than clothing. The sleeve was torn open, exposing pale skin beneath. His movements were jerky, twitchy, like he couldn't stand still, and his head kept jerking over his shoulder as if someone was following him. I slowed my old Volvo to a crawl, every instinct telling me to cancel and keep driving. My finger hovered over the cancel button. I should have pressed it. I didn't. When I stopped, he opened the back door without a word and slid in, sinking low into the seat. The smell hit me immediately, sweat, cigarettes, something acrid I couldn't place. My foot was still on the brake, and I felt the regret hit like a punch to the chest. But I shifted into drive anyway, and the night swallowed us whole. Most passengers distract themselves with their phones, or they gaze blankly out the window. Not him. His eyes were fixed on me in the rearview mirror, not blinking, not breaking contact, just staring. Every time I caught his gaze, my skin crawled. He looked angry, or maybe just hollow, but either way, it felt like I was being studied, measured. I tried to break the tension by turning on the radio, but the moment the music came through, he snapped, his voice low and rasping. Turn it off. The sound startled me so badly I jerked the steering wheel. Without arguing, I killed the music. Silence pressed down like a weight. We drove like that for a while. Me, gripping the wheel too tight. Him, staring. The hum of the engine was the only sound. Then, he spoke. Ever pick up someone you shouldn't have? His words cut the silence like a knife. My nervous laugh sounded pathetic, even to me. I hope not, I said. No reaction. He just leaned back, muttering to himself words I couldn't catch. I wished he would shut up. Instead, he launched into a slurred story about how he used to drive for Uber, until some punk stole from him. He smiled the whole time he told it. That smile was worse than his stare. It didn't fit. It was the smile of someone remembering something they enjoyed, not something that pissed them off. When he finished, he leaned forward just enough for his voice to crawl into my ears. It's funny, isn't it? How much trust you put in someone sitting right behind you. The words sank into me like ice water. He was right. He was close enough to reach over the seat, to wrap his hands around my throat if he wanted to. Every second stretched longer than the last. My pulse hammered, but I kept driving, eyes locked on the glowing line of the GPS like it was my only lifeline. He wouldn't shut up. Sometimes he babbled nonsense. Sometimes he whispered apologies to someone who wasn't there. At one point he mumbled, "I didn't mean it," over and over again, his voice breaking. I didn't know who he was talking to or what he was apologizing for, but I didn't want to find out. We were minutes from his destination when it escalated. His muttering stopped, and suddenly he barked at me. "You missed the turn." His voice was sharp, furious. I hadn't missed anything. The GPS was clear, but fear made me slam the brakes. My hands were shaking as I pulled to the shoulder, He demanded I stop the car. So I did. The air in the car was suffocating. My skin prickled with dread. That was when headlights appeared in my mirror. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street, its spotlight sweeping over the road. For one terrifying second, I thought the man would lash out at me. But instead, he slid down, pressing himself flat across the back seat, eyes squeezed shut as if he could will himself invisible. I stared ahead, rigid, praying silently that the officer would notice something. The cruiser drifted past, its light briefly washing over my car before moving on into the dark. Minutes passed like hours. The man didn't move. Then, without warning, he sat up, grinned, and whispered, "You got lucky." He opened the door and slipped out into the night, disappearing between the shadows of the buildings. I sat frozen, hands locked on the wheel, until the door slammed shut behind him. My breath finally came, ragged and shaky. I ended the shift early. My nerves were shot. When I got home, I replayed it all again and again in my head, wondering if I'd overreacted, wondering if maybe he'd just been some drugged-out creep. Then, weeks later, I saw the headline.
Can I help you?
A convenience store just 2 blocks from where I'd picked him up had been robbed that same night. The description of the suspect was vague, but it didn't have to be. I knew. I had driven him. He had sat behind me, staring, grinning, whispering. And if not for those headlights in the distance, I don't know what might have happened. Now, when I drive, I check my mirrors differently, I grip the wheel differently, and I finally installed a dash cam. But deep down, I know it won't change the truth. That night, I let a dangerous man into my car. And the only reason I'm still here to tell the story is because of blind luck. Silence was the one thing I thought I craved. After years in the city, where every horn, every slammed door, every distant siren pierced straight through me, I couldn't take it anymore. My psychiatrist called it phonophobia, a rare condition where even the smallest sound felt like a jolt of electricity under my skin. Living that way was unbearable, so when I found a cabin deep in the Oregon woods, buried beneath layers of pine and mist, I convinced myself it was salvation. It was remote, cut off, and most importantly, quiet. The first days were everything I imagined. I woke to birdsong instead of alarms. At night, the only sound was the wind moving lazily through the trees. The cabin smelled of pine and aged wood, with a sturdy stone fireplace that radiated warmth. It felt timeless, as if it had been waiting for me. I thought I'd finally found peace, but the woods have a way of twisting peace into something else, into dread. It was a week before I met her. The knock came in the late afternoon. There was no doorbell, just 3 firm raps that echoed too loudly in the silence. When I opened the door, she was standing there like she had been waiting for me all along. She looked to be in her late 60s, her hair long, gray, and tangled, her eyes an unsettling shade of blue that seemed to see through me. She carried a wicker basket filled with jars of preserves, holding it out like an offering. She introduced herself as Michelle. My neighbor, though her house was a 10-minute walk down a narrow path through the dense forest. At first glance, she could have stepped out of a friendly postcard. But there was something off, something I couldn't name. She pressed the basket into my hands before I even agreed to take it, her eyes fixed on me, waiting. I mumbled thanks, awkward, not sure what else to say. That's when she leaned closer, her voice lowering into something between advice and command. Always keep your lanterns full, your windows shut tight, and your wits sharper than your axe. The words chilled me. They weren't neighborly. They sounded rehearsed, like rules handed down from someone else. My smile faltered, but I nodded anyway, eager to shut the door. When I finally closed it, I stood frozen, listening for her footsteps. She didn't leave right away. She lingered. I counted the seconds, 45 of them, before I finally heard her retreat. That night, a thunderstorm rolled in. Lightning forked through the trees. Thunder cracked so loud it rattled the glass panes. The power flickered, then died. I lit candles, curled up with a book, and tried to enjoy the storm's natural rhythm. Strangely, the thunder didn't unsettle me the way city noise did. It was raw, organic, almost soothing. But peace never lasts. The banging started just after midnight. It wasn't a polite knock this time. It was violent, insistent, as though whoever stood outside wanted the door to come off its hinges. My chest tightened, pins and needles spreading under my skin. I grabbed a flashlight, forcing myself to peek through the narrow window. Michelle stood on my porch, soaked to the bone, clutching a flashlight of her own. Her long hair stuck to her face, and her eyes darted wildly toward the trees. Before I could speak, she blurted out, "There's someone near your woodpile. You should know." Her urgency rattled me. I stepped outside, shining my beam into the rain. Nothing but trees and darkness. When I asked if she was sure, She nodded quickly, her eyes scanning the tree line like she expected something or someone to emerge. Then, without waiting for a response, she turned and walked into the storm, disappearing down the path. I stood there until her light vanished, confusion gnawing at me. How could she have seen my woodpile from her house 10 minutes away? The only explanation was that she had already been on my property. The storm faded into uneasy silence. Hours passed. I locked every window, every door, and finally crept into bed. Sometime after midnight, I woke to the sharp crack of a branch snapping just outside my window. I froze, holding my breath, then slowly crawled to the glass. The moonlight gave just enough to see, and there she was, Michelle, standing at the edge of the woods, her body angled away, hair dripping, her posture unnatural, too still. I ducked before she could turn. When I looked again, she was gone. Sleep was impossible. I stayed awake, waiting for dawn, nerves shredded. But as exhaustion dragged at me, another knock came at the door. This one was different, slow, deliberate. My body screamed not to answer. I forced myself to peek again, praying it was no one. It wasn't Michelle. It was a man I had never seen before. Broad shoulders, bald head, a thick beard. His presence radiated menace. I backed away, heart slamming in my chest. Then came the pounding. The door shook as he hammered at it with something heavy. I bolted to the bathroom, locked the door, and called the police with shaking hands. The sounds of destruction followed. Glass shattering, wood splintering. My cabin was being torn apart. I smothered my breathing, convinced each crash would be followed by his footsteps searching for me. But he never came down the hall. Minutes dragged like hours until, finally, silence. The officers arrived faster than I expected, but the man was gone, vanished into the woods. I begged them to search deeper, but they refused. Too dense, they said. Too risky. I demanded they at least come with me to Michelle's cabin. They agreed, reluctantly. But when we arrived, my blood ran cold. The cabin was abandoned, rotting, dust thick on the windows, cobwebs covering the corners. No signs of life for decades. The officers insisted no one lived there, that no Michelle existed. They left me with a shrug, saying living in the woods carried risks. But I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on me, even as I packed my things and prepared to leave for good. That final night was torture. Every creak of the wood felt like a footstep, every gust of wind like a breath at my ear. But nothing happened, and I survived until morning. I don't know where or what Michelle really was. Some of my friends think she was a spirit, warning me, protecting me. Others say she and the man were squatters, hiding in the abandoned cabin, plotting something worse. I don't know which version is true. Maybe neither. All I know is that I went into those woods looking for peace. What I found instead was the kind of silence that doesn't comfort, the kind of silence that listens back. Christmas Eve had become our tradition. Not the presents or the decorated trees, but the drive itself. Every year after celebrating with my family, my girlfriend Catherine and I would pack the car just past midnight and take the long back roads from my house in Ohio to hers. It was quiet, snowy, and the roads were ours alone. We called it our holiday highway, a space between families where it felt like the world didn't exist. With the heat blasting and Juice WRLD songs echoing through the speakers, it was supposed to be the one night where nothing could go wrong. But this past Christmas, the silence we loved turned into something sinister. The first call came not long after we left. An unknown number flashed across my screen, glowing against the dashboard in the darkness. I let it ring out, assuming it was a scammer. Catherine laughed and joked about how dedicated telemarketers must be to work on Christmas Eve. I smiled and kept driving, snowflakes drifting across the beams of my headlights. The moment passed, but then it rang again. Same number, same late hour. I frowned, ignoring it once more, but something about it bothered me. Out here, no one should be calling. No one should even know we were on the road. When it rang a third time, irritation boiled over. I snatched the phone up, swiped to answer, and snapped a sharp hello into the receiver. Silence answered. For a few long seconds, all I could hear was faint static, like the sound of an old radio barely tuned to a station. I almost hung up. That's when a man's voice broke through. Calm, low, direct. Hello, Luke. The sound of my own name nearly made me swerve. My grip tightened on the wheel, sweat pricking my forehead despite the freezing air outside. I didn't speak, waiting for him to continue. And he did. He began reciting information, my full name, my address. Details about my life that no stranger should ever know. Each word was like a blade cutting into my sense of safety. Catherine shifted in her seat, her eyes wide, but she stayed silent. I finally forced the words out, trying to sound steady. "What do you want?" His pause felt endless. Then, "I'm not here for you. I'm here for Catherine." The sound of her name twisted my stomach into knots. Catherine gasped, her hand gripping my arm so tightly it hurt. I stammered out a denial, insisting he had the wrong person, that I didn't know any Catherine. But he chuckled, a soft, cruel laugh that made the hair on my arm stand on end. "She's sitting right next to you." The world seemed to tilt. I jerked the car to the side of the road, slamming into park. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Before I could respond, Catherine snatched it from me and ended the call with one quick motion. The screen went black. Just like that, silence reclaimed the car, heavier than before. I turned on her, my voice rising with panic. "Why would you hang up?" I demanded. "He knew our names. He knew about you." Her eyes filled with tears. She stammered that she was scared, that she didn't know what else to do. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at me. Who was this man? How did he know? And why did he target her? I tried calling the number back. Once, twice, 3 times. Each time, the call failed. The line was dead. Catherine begged me to keep driving, her voice trembling. Reluctantly, I put the car back in gear. The snow crunched under the tires as we pulled back onto the road. But the drive no longer felt like ours. It felt like we were being watched. The rest of the trip stretched on in tense silence. I didn't turn the music back on. My mind spun with questions I couldn't answer. I glanced at Catherine, tears streaking down her face, her gaze fixed out the window into the dark fields beyond. Every time the phone buzzed with a notification, my heart leapt, but the unknown number never called again. Not that night. We finally reached her house hours later. The lights were still on, her family awake and waiting, but their warmth couldn't thaw the chill that had settled in my chest. I told no one. Neither did she. We acted like nothing had happened, but I could see the fear in her eyes every time my phone lit up. Even after the holidays, even weeks later, that fear never left. I tried to investigate. I asked my family, her family, anyone who might have known our route that night. Everyone denied it. No one confessed to some twisted prank. And besides, who could have known such personal details?
This wasn't just someone guessing. This was targeted. Intentional. That's when the paranoia began. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. Every time a car followed too close behind me at night, I felt watched. The worst part wasn't the call itself. It was the knowledge that he knew us, that he had reached into our private lives with ease, and that he wasn't finished. His words echoed in my mind over and over. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for Catherine. It's been nearly a month, and he hasn't called back. But I know he will. It's only a matter of time." Sometimes I wake in the middle of the night, sure I've heard the phone vibrating on the nightstand, even though the screen is dark. Catherine insists she has no idea who he is, that she's just as terrified as I am. I want to believe her. But late at night when the doubts creep in, I can't shake the thought. What if she does know? What if this was never random? Out there somewhere, a man has our names, our numbers, our secrets. He knows where we'll be, when we'll be vulnerable. And he promised me something in his silence. Promise that he isn't finished. The question that keeps me awake is not whether he'll call again. It's whether when he does, we'll still be alive to answer. There is something far more terrifying than monsters or shadows lurking in abandoned houses. It is the realization that the everyday moments of our lives, the ones we barely think about, can twist suddenly into nightmares. When we look back at these 3 stories, the rideshare driver who picked up the wrong passenger, the cabin owner who discovered her neighbor was not what she seemed, and the young couple who received a call that pierced into their most private world, a single truth ties them together. Horror doesn't need the supernatural to be real. It only needs people. People we do not know, people we think we know, and sometimes even people closest to us. Think about the first story. A man driving for Lyft. Just another late night shift. He thought he was simply giving a ride to someone outside a convenience store. Instead, he was face to face with a criminal who had just committed a robbery. The details are haunting. The way the passenger stared through the mirror, unblinking, almost as if daring him to acknowledge the danger. The way he smiled while describing betrayal, as though he enjoyed remembering pain. And worst of all, the way he reminded the driver of just how vulnerable he truly was. A thin sheet of glass separated his throat from the man's hands. No one else was around. No camera was rolling. He had gambled with his life the moment he unlocked the door. What makes this story sickening is not only the fact that the passenger was a criminal,
but that he had a choice in every moment. He could have harmed the driver. He could have killed him. He didn't. Not because of kindness, but because luck intervened. The appearance of police lights at the exact right time was the only barrier between survival and silence. The second story forces us into a different nightmare. This one isn't about the open road, but about isolation. A cabin in the woods is supposed to represent safety, peace, and escape from the chaos of the world. For the narrator, it was meant to be a cure for a condition that made every sound unbearable. And for a few days, it was exactly that. But the forest has a way of amplifying fear. In cities, noise protects us. It tells us others are near. Out there in the wilderness, silence becomes suspicious. When the neighbor appeared, her warning cloaked as kindness. It felt strange, but not immediately dangerous. Only later did the puzzle unravel. Her words rehearsed, her presence at the woodpile impossible, her long stares unnatural, and then the truth, or at least part of it, was revealed. A man, massive and violent, breaking into the cabin, glass shattered, wood splintered, the narrator huddled in the bathroom as destruction consumed the home. By the time police arrived, both intruder and neighbor were gone. Michelle's cabin, which had looked lived in, turned out to be abandoned for decades. Was she a ghost, a squatter, or a partner in crime? The answer never came. What lingered was the lesson. When you are cut off from the world, there is no one to rely on but yourself. And when something stares back from the darkness, you may never know if it's real. The third story threads horror through technology. Not a haunted house, not a forest, but a phone. A simple, familiar object we hold in our hands every day became the weapon. Luke and Catherine's drive should have been filled with music and warmth.
Instead, it was invaded by a stranger who not only knew Luke's name, but knew Catherine's too. Knew where they lived, knew details no outsider could possibly guess.
The voice was not threatening in the traditional sense. He did not shout or rage. He simply recited facts. Facts that ripped away the illusion of privacy. When he whispered that he wasn't there for Luke, but for Catherine, the car's warmth froze. What chills the blood in this story is not just the knowledge of being watched, but the possibility that the threat was closer than Luke imagined. Catherine's reaction cutting the call, refusing to explain it, a layer of suspicion that hasn't gone away. Was she innocent, another victim of a stalker? Or was she connected in some way to the voice on the line? The unanswered questions are what gnaw deepest. Placed side by side, these three stories create a map of terror. The rideshare car, the isolated cabin, the Christmas road, all familiar, all ordinary. The horror grows not from darkness itself, but from the intrusion of the unexpected. Safety becomes unsafe. Trust becomes betrayal. Silence becomes suffocating. And the lesson that emerges is cruelly simple. You are never as secure as you believe. That stranger behind you, that neighbor at your door, that voice on the line that could be anyone, and they could want anything. There is a reason these stories stick in the mind long after they are told. They force us to confront how fragile our control really is. The driver thought he controlled his car. The cabin owner thought she controlled her space. Luke thought he controlled his phone. All of them learned otherwise. Each setting, once familiar, became a stage where vulnerability was exposed. The horror was not some distant monster. It was right there, breathing the same air, waiting for the right moment to act. Perhaps the scariest part is how easily we can imagine ourselves in these places. Who hasn't ordered a ride share late at night, assuming it would be safe? Who hasn't dreamed of a retreat in the woods, believing solitude to be harmless? Who hasn't answered a phone call from a number they didn't recognize, curious rather than afraid? These are everyday choices. We make them without thinking. And yet, each one could be the opening to a nightmare. That is what makes the stories unforgettable. They are not built on fantasy. They are built on possibilities. And the line between possibility and reality is thinner than we like to admit. When you step back, the conclusion is chilling but inescapable. Horror does not wait in the shadows. It hides in the routines, the rituals, the ordinary acts of life. It is the stranger you give a ride to, the neighbor you welcome at your door, the voice that slips through a phone call in the dead of night. You don't see it coming, not until it's too late. And sometimes, the only thing that saves you is luck. Luck that cannot be counted on twice. That is why these stories matter. Not because they are entertainment, but because they are warnings. Warnings about how quickly normality can dissolve. Warnings about the price you pay when you ignore your instincts. Each narrator survived, but barely. They survived because of timing, chance, or desperation. Not because they were safe, but because danger let them go. for now, and so we are left with a question that lingers like a shadow at the edge of the room. When it is your turn, when the stranger gets into your car, when the knock comes on your door, when the phone rings in the night, will you be ready? Or will you realize too late that you are not the one in control? Because horror is not waiting far away. It is already here. It has always been here. When you look at these three stories together, one chilling truth rises to the surface. Danger does not arrive with warning. It creeps in quietly, disguising itself as the ordinary. A late-night passenger, a friendly neighbor, a phone call in the dark. Each of these moments began as something familiar, even mundane. But familiarity is the mask that horror wears best. The rideshare driver believed he was simply picking up a customer. Instead, he found himself inches away from a violent criminal. His survival hinged not on his own decisions, but on the coincidental presence of a passing police car. The lesson here is sobering. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong before it even begins, you must listen. Ignoring that gut feeling could be the very thing that costs you your safety. The cabin dweller thought isolation would protect her. Silence would be her salvation. But silence can also conceal. A stranger, or perhaps something worse, had already claimed the woods around her. Whether Michelle was a spirit or a trespasser, the message remained clear: when you cut yourself off from the world, you also cut yourself off from help. Isolation magnifies vulnerability. The solution is to prepare before fear arrives. Secure your doors, have a plan, and never assume the woods are empty. The couple on the Christmas drive faced a different terror-themed invasion of privacy. The stranger on the phone didn't need to appear in person to destroy their sense of safety. His voice was enough. He reached across miles of darkness, armed only with knowledge. This is a reminder that our information, our patterns, even our most private moments can be exploited. Protecting yourself in the digital age is not optional. Keep your data safe, share your plans with caution, and never assume you are beyond reach. What ties these stories together is not just fear, but vulnerability. Each narrator found themselves stripped of control, confronted with the realization that safety is fragile, and yet all three survived. They survived because they recognized the danger, because they reacted even in panic. Survival is not about bravery. It is about awareness. It is about refusing to dismiss the small details that scream when something is wrong. If you ever find yourself in situations like these, remember, trust your instincts. Lock your doors. Protect your information. Speak up, call for help, or walk away if necessary. Horror thrives on hesitation.
Trust your instincts.
On the moment when you second-guess yourself. Do not give it that chance, because in the end, there is always a price. A price for caution or a price for carelessness. The choice, if you are lucky enough to have it, belongs to you. These stories are not just entertainment. They are warnings written in the fear of real people who live through them. And if you want more of these unsettling truths, more tales that reveal just how close horror really is, then subscribe to The Price Paid. Because the scariest stories are not fiction. They are what already walks beside you in the dark.